Good morning, hope you're well. Sunday, March 12th, 2017. My name is Richie Allen. This is Sunday View. Thanks for tuning into it. It's live on davidike.com, Fab Radio 2, TuneIn Radio, and my own website, redistribution.co.uk. It is exactly the top of the hour. It's 11 a.m. GMT this Sunday. Lot to talk about. Interesting Sunday View coming up over the next 40 to 45, maybe even 50 to 55 minutes. Good morning.
For critical information ignored by the mainstream media, log on to davidike.com/headlines now.
Broadcasting live from the great city of Manchester, England. This is the Richie Allen Show on davidike.com.
Yes, it's live, of course, it's live, and as it's live, you may tweet me at any time. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. It is richie at redistribution.co.uk via email. Tweeting me is much better, because it's much more instant. Say that all the time. Glorious morning here in Manchester. It's lovely, absolutely gorgeous for Sunday, March 12th. Spent a few hours in Blackpool yesterday, really enjoyed that. Lovely in the early morning in Blackpool, got a bit miserable in the afternoon, but it was lovely to be by the sea. The tide was in while we were there. Not that it goes out very far in Blackpool, but it was lovely, so I enjoyed that yesterday. And I'm in fine fettle today, looking forward to Sunday, and I was looking forward to speaking with you all morning. Now, if you're following davidike.com on social media, you will know that the great man has landed in Slovenia, and that is where the next leg of the Worldwide Wake Up Tour is going to commence, and that's next Saturday. Okay, so that's next Saturday, this coming Saturday. Now, it's a case of where it's not going to be after that, thereafter, because it is travelling all over Europe and it's going to Canada. It's going all over the world through 2017. So for more details on that, do check out davidike.com and the special website, theworldwidewakeup.com. If you get a chance to see David in 2017, I heartily recommend that you grab it with both hands. Good morning to you. Good morning. Right. So, now, excuse me. Sorry for clearing my throat in your ear there, but rather foolishly, I had some peanuts with my breakfast. I had a very healthy breakfast, and the peanuts have kind of gone against me. But there you are. You don't care about that. We're going to talk a bit about Brexit and the possibility of no deal whatsoever, because this is the dominant issue in today's Sunday newspapers here in the United Kingdom. So I'm going to talk about that extensively. But before we talk about that, a number of you are tweeting me, and thank you for tweeting me, but let me just tell you, those of you who have tweeted me, while you're just about turning over and going into your second dream, I'm up and reading the Sunday newspapers. You don't need to tweet me the Sunday newspapers, the cheek of you. Lazy arse. I've been up since 5, and I really have been up since 5, reading the papers. So the next time you tweet me a Sunday newspaper, I'm going to find you, and I'm going to kick the arse off you, is what I'm going to do. Right. A number of you have tweeted me, and I'm joking, of course, that the Sunday Times leads with today the story, and the headline is GCHQ Russian cyber threat to UK elections. Yes, there is no end. There is no limit to the anti-Russian or Russophobic propaganda in US and in UK mainstream news and in the newspapers. What's the gist of this? Well, the gist of it is that GCHQ is offering advice to the main political parties on how to prevent Russian hackers tampering with democracy. They are going to hold seminars to educate politicians on the threat from the Kremlin after its spies were accused of carrying out cyber attacks to tamper with the US and German elections. Just pause for a moment, dear listener, and bask in the reflective, monumental, fecking idiocy of that. Politicians would go to seminars held by GCHQ, the spies, and they would be educated, right, on the threat from the Kremlin. Of course, what would really be going on there is All the while the politicians are at the seminars, their cars, their phones, their mobile phones that is, their clothes, their briefcases and their laptops would be bugged. The living bejesus would be bugged out of them by the GCHQ agents hosting the seminars. It's madness, isn't it? Isn't it madness? No mention in the Sunday Times, by the way, of the Vault 7 leaks, which suggest that if the CIA or anybody else wanted to make it look like the Russians were hacking, they would be able to do that quite easily. No mention of that. Kieran Martin. Well, it's actually Kieran Martin, but it's spelt like Kieran. He's the chief executive of GCHQ's National Cybersecurity Centre. He's written to the leaders of all the main parties to offer advice on how to withstand attacks. And I know there will be people listening to this going, what a rather far-fetched scenario there, boy. That they would be spied upon while attending these seminars. Of course they would. It's exactly the purpose of it. I'm not going to spend much time on this today because there's so much of it. If the Russians are not hacking elections, the Russians are killing innocent people in Syria. If they're not doing that, they are trying to subvert the result of every sporting competition on planet Earth by cheating. The Russians, the Russians, the Russians. Lunacy. But the Sunday Times is owned by News Corp, which is owned by Murdoch. So what do you expect? No proof. Hi, I'm Kieran Martin from GCHQ. I think the Russians might be hacking your political party servers. So why don't you come with me into this lovely dark underground room and I will tell you there how to avoid this. I won't offer you any proof, mind, that the Russians are doing this, but while you're here, we'll have a good old look at you. Yeah. Right, we're leaving that story alone even. That was today's Sunday Times. Thank you, Spirit Samba. Now, before I talk a little bit about this, excuse me, nonsense in the papers today about Brexit and no deal and the government are not prepared for a situation where there's no deal and all of that. Let me just, for those of you who are new to the programme or for those of you who listen to the programme but you don't understand the goings on in Westminster, at the Palace of Westminster, let me tell you about the House of Lords. Very briefly, the House of Lords, this is all allegedly now. This is officially, the House of Lords scrutinises bills that were voted on and approved by MPs in the House of Commons. Okay? It regularly does, the House of Lords, it reviews and amends those bills. Now, it cannot prevent a bill passing into law unless it's in very limited circumstances, but it can delay bills and force the MPs in the House of Commons to reconsider their decisions. So the House of Lords supposedly acts as a check on the House of Commons that is independent from the electoral process. The problem with that is, unlike the House of Commons, the members of the House of Lords are appointed. They are appointed. And I got into this on last week's Richie Allen show. They are often given their peerages because of their support for political parties, donors and such like. So there's nothing democratic about it. It's not good. That's the House of Lords. They might get a mention or two or three throughout the rest of this broadcast. So there you are. So I've told you. Now, so the most covered story in today's papers is Brexit. Is there a plan for a no-deal scenario? Is there? And whether Parliament should have a vote on the final agreement ahead of tomorrow's Commons debate on the bill. Another debate tomorrow. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So, before we look at today's Sunday papers, this is Sky News' Sophie Ridge on the big row today.
Parliament is gearing up for another Brexit battle round. Whispers are building that the government will trigger Article 50 in days and start the process of leaving the EU. First, though, they need to get the legislation through Parliament. Brexit Minister David Davis says the people have decided. Now it's time to let the Prime Minister get on with the job. By a majority of 4-1, MPs passed straightforward legislation allowing the government to move ahead with no strings attached. I will be asking MPs to send the legislation back to the House of Lords in its original form so that we can start building a global Britain and a strong new partnership with the EU.
We've considered all aspects of the bill, and the bill was unamended in the House of Commons. It is therefore quite right for the House of Commons to insist that the bill remains unamended, and it will then be returned to the House of Lords, and it would be my expectation that the House of Lords would not then continue to press their amendments.
Peers are calling for the rights of EU nationals living in the UK to be protected and for a meaningful vote on the outcome of divorce talks with the EU. Labour has written to the government calling on them to reflect and reconsider the two amendments. According to Liz Kendall, the priority is to get an agreement that works for Britain.
I voted Remain. I thought it's right for the country, but that decision has been taken now. We've got to get a good deal. It's happened now. The vote's been taken. We need to make sure we get something that works for us all. And that's what we need to be doing in Parliament.
Yeah, Liz Kendall, Sophie Ridge of Sky News with the report. Now, the Sunday Observer's headline is MPs slam May over lack of a plan if Brexit talks collapse. Okay? Theresa May, says the Sunday Observer, has been accused by the all-party Foreign Affairs Select Committee of putting the national interest at risk by failing to prepare for the real prospect that 2 years of Brexit negotiations could end up with no deal, with nothing at the end of it. That's in the Sunday Observer. So they're putting the national interest at risk by not preparing for the real prospect that at the end of 2 years of negotiation there won't be a deal. Okay? Only days before May is expected to trigger Article 50, the all-party Foreign Affairs Select Committee is saying the government is playing fast and loose with the futures of the British people. Now, Crispin Blunt is the chairman of the committee, the Conservative Party chairman of the committee. He's an MP. Now, he allegedly is a supporter of leaving the European Union. He spoke a little bit earlier on with Andrew Marr on the BBC's flagship Sunday programme, The Andrew Marr Show. This is how that went.
Now, you are, as a committee, outraged the government hasn't been doing any planning. David Davies says he's been planning away. There was a cabinet meeting recently where they discussed little else but what would happen if there wasn't a deal.
Well, the point about the Mail on Sunday with its cheerful headline about dereliction of duty, we're saying that's what would happen if they didn't plan properly for this. So what we're asking
they're not planning?
Well, it now begins to become clear from the briefing that came out of the cabinet meeting that you've just referred to that this planning appears to be starting. And of course, the implications of no deal can't inform the negotiating position completely. So one would anticipate this happening internally. It now seems that it's happening, and if our report and the headlines today put a bit of oomph behind that planning, that's a really good thing.
So it's a non-story then. What in the name of all that's sacred is the Sunday Observer and the Daily Mail, which I'll tell you about in a minute? What are they talking about? He said they are planning. What's he complaining about? Why the screaming headlines? And then Andrew Marr asks him this, him being again Crispin Blunt, who's heading up this all-party Foreign Affairs Select Committee.
Do you think people should actually see what the government's plans for no deal are? Do you think it should be published?
Yes, and it's one of the reasons we've got into this space is, as parliamentarians, we think we've got a responsibility to help businesses and individuals prepare for the consequences of a probable outcome or a possible outcome, which is that there's no deal at the end of 2 years.
And what's the effect of that on the negotiating position of the government, do you think?
Well, my view is it strengthens it, because you then have a clear sense you can cope with no deal, and if you actually look at the implications on both sides, that in absolute terms, it's my view that the impact on the 27 is greater in a negative sense in absolute terms than it is on the UK, because that's where the balance of trade sits, and that's where the money flows sit at the minute, and it's where, of course, most people are.
Hallelujah. Yeah, he said it there, and we've been saying it since the vote took place on June 23rd last year. The balance of power lies with the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, in any bargaining, negotiation, long-winded negotiations, any bargaining, any discussions about how the UK would leave the European Union. The UK's hand is vastly stronger than the negotiating even position of the European Union. It's as simple as that. And finally, Blunt was asked by Marth this morning, on what exactly would MPs vote on in the end?
Strong language. Do you think MPs, if there isn't a deal, should have a vote anyway?
I think we're going to get a vote. I understand we're going to get a vote.
Even if there isn't a deal? I don't think so.
Well, if there isn't a deal, there is no deal. So there's nothing in that sense. There's nothing to vote on.
Yeah, exactly. So whether or not the MPs will have a final say on any agreement that's reached, we have yet to figure that one out. David Davis is urging the Lords, and he's urging those who voted for or who campaigned for the UK to stay in to accept that they lost, that the government will do a deal with the European Union and the government will sign off on that, and it shouldn't in any way at all need any parliamentary approval. So you're going to hear more about this tomorrow. Like I said, the Sunday Mail is running a similar story, dereliction of his duty, a story about David Davis failing in his duties as the Brexit minister, saying again that they have no plan in the event that there isn't a deal reached. Blunt himself said there that it seems that there is a plan. There is a plan. Now I've been keeping abreast of this for a long time before the referendum, a long time, and for pretty much every single day since the referendum of June 23rd last year. Coming out of the European Union without an agreement with the European Union, what would that mean exactly? Well, it would what would happen immediately is the European Union and the UK would be subject to World Trade Organization rules. So what are World Trade Organization rules which would be relevant in the event there was no overall trade agreement between the UK and the EU? Well, World Trade Organization rules state clearly that following a vote for the UK to leave, and in the absence of a trade agreement, the European Union would have to offer the UK something called most favoured nation terms for the UK's exports. This is coming directly from the World Trade Organization. What does that mean? Well, most favoured nation terms means that any concession the EU offers to one of its trading partners should also be applied to other partners. You get it? So if they cut a tariff for one partner, they also have to cut that for all others, including the United Kingdom. So to summarise that, and this is vital, because this is not being discussed on national talk programmes today on television or radio, meaning that the public is completely uneducated about this. They have no idea. To summarise that, if the European Union destroys the deal and plays silly idiots and decides that we're not going to do a deal after the 2 years, if they deliberately break down the negotiations, which of course must take place within 2 years of the triggering of Article 50. So let's say March 2019. If they say no deal on anything with the UK and the European Union would automatically still have a trade deal. And this is what you are not being told through your newspapers, through your TV programmes. An automatic deal. Because the UK and the EU are both World Trade Organization members in their own right, exclusive of one another. And the WTO specifies these WTO members must offer each other most favoured nation deals. Do you get that? Do you get that? This negates any reason whatsoever for the UK to remain inside the European Union anyway. To be a member of the World Trade Organization, you must offer other members most favoured nation deals. And this is what the monumental liars in the mainstream media are hiding from you. And I'll tell you something else. This is what many of those people, including Theresa May, who is allegedly in favour of the UK leaving the European Union, they never tell you that. They never tell you that. The minute the negotiations stop and it's all over, and the minute we find out there's no deal after 2 years, WTO rules kick in immediately, most favoured nation rules kick in, and we get the best of everything. Eh? You understand that, right? Of course you do. You listen to programmes like this, you stay in touch with davidicke.com/headlines. But the vast majority of people in this country, to repeat myself incessantly and to labour the point, have no idea. And this is why we do this programme, to give you the undiluted truth. No spin, no lies. WTO rules will be brilliant for the UK. Speaking of David Davis, the Brexit minister, he spoke to Andrew Marr too today, and here's a snippet of that.
The simple truth is we have been planning for the contingency, all the various outcomes, all the possible outcomes of the
including a proper plan for no deal.
Oh yes. In terms, indeed, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I can't remember what it was now. It was briefed out that I had spent most of the cabinet meeting talking to the cabinet about the importance of making sure the contingency plans were online, as well as the other plans. Now,
so
bear in mind,
do you have part of your team, as it were, round the back of the building, thinking if it doesn't work, this is what we'll have to do?
It's not just my team. It's the whole of Whitehall. It's every single department. But understand, it's the contingency plan. The aim is to get a good outcome, and we are confident. I'm confident I get a good outcome.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons we don't talk about the contingency plan too much is we don't want people to think, oh, this is what we're trying to do. That's there because we need to have it there for two reasons. One, if, as I think Crispin intimated to you earlier, the chairman of the Select Committee intimated to you earlier, it does go wrong for whatever reason. We need to be ready for that and make sure that we're in a good position to deal with that. But if we get the main outcome, it's actually quite helpful in the negotiation and in the planning for that.
For them to know that we are planning for no
for us
deal.
For us to be confident that we don't face, as you say, a cliff edge or something.
Yeah, a cliff edge or something. It's madness, really, isn't it? Let's hold the threat over their heads. Let's hold the threat over their heads that we might destroy the negotiations and that we might leave on World Trade Organization rules. But isn't that madness? What the World Trade Organization means and the rules of it mean, there's no need for any negotiation over 2 years. The UK can walk out of the European Union today. Today. Now, Davis is urging MPs to leave the bill for exiting the UK unchanged when it is debated in the Commons again tomorrow. He's asking MPs to throw out measures to allow for a meaningful parliamentary vote on the final exit package. This is serious. This is the obfuscation we're talking about on this programme. They don't want to leave the European Union. Who's they, Richie? The people who control the puppets at Westminster don't want the UK to leave the European Union. So tomorrow will be the second time MPs debate and vote on the EU withdrawal bill and send it back to the Lords. Okay? I wrote an open letter to Juncker and Merkel and Guy Verhofstadt, the EU's chief negotiator. I wrote an open letter to these people, which I doubt any of them ever read, and published it on this on this programme's Facebook page, Twitter. David Icke shared it as well, and it was about the very thing we just spoke about in the last few minutes. The EU is in a completely, I would say, it has no bargaining position whatsoever against the against the UK. Because we buy more from them than we sell to them. There are more European Union citizens living here than there are UK citizens living in the EU, and all of that. I'll publish that letter again today. I put it online several months ago. It's crazy. But there are very strong forces at work to stop the EU and the UK divorcing And I'm going to tell you more about those strong forces in a couple of minutes after a very quick break. You are with the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on davidicke.com, Fab Radio 2 and TuneIn Radio. Back in a minute.
Looking to arrange a mortgage? Confused by all the deals available? Let Manchester Mortgages do the work for you. Take advantage of our free mortgage review offer throughout February and March and see if we can save you money. We are whole of market brokers with access to hundreds of mortgage schemes across the UK. Call us on 0161 706 0242 or go to manchestermortgages.co.uk. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage. Manchester Mortgages are a trading style of Mortgages for You North West Limited, who are authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Virtually every transaction that involves a child is valuable to somebody.
We intend to show everyone the real reason children are being removed at an alarming rate.
No, this is awful.
The baby's not been seen by the doctor or nothing.
They are psychopathic. They have got the legal right to kill children now, because that's what they're doing.
Traffic 2, available now at premiumandpictures.co.uk.
Jim Rickards here, best-selling author of Currency Wars and The Road to Ruin. But today I'm issuing a critical new warning to all British listeners. Britain is under attack and your personal and financial security is in grave danger. To find out why, visit britainunderattack.co.uk now. The threat of this devastating attack increases every day, and it's crucial you act before it's too late. To see what you can do about it, visit britainunderattack.co.uk right away. It's not too late to prepare. See my full warning at britainunderattack.co.uk today.
Right, welcome back. It's Sunday View. It's live. It's Sunday, March 12th, 2017. And my name is Richie Allen. It's great to be with you. It always is. Thank you for tuning into this particular programme. You know, in 2.5 years, one of the things I've never done, I've never bragged. Because there isn't anything to brag about. At all. There's nothing to be getting triumphalist about. There's nothing to be singing about. But you know what the tragedy is? The sort of information I presented to you a few minutes ago about World Trade Organization trading rules is not being broadcast, it's not being discussed, analysed or disseminated on any other platform in the United Kingdom today, whether that be corporate media or the alleged independent media. That is a tragedy. It's a tragedy. You know? And I could go into a long-winded because I've not done it for a long time. It's been a long time since I've put out a donation appeal on this programme. I got so sick of doing it. But without programmes like this, there's no future for media. There isn't. You know, and even with programmes like this, how much use that information is today to the UK and to the wider public at large when... You know, when you're competing against the gigantic monster that is corporate mainstream media, and you're operating on your own, basically, out of a studio which is wonderful and it's state of the art and all of that in Manchester, but you're not on the same platforms as these people. You can't possibly reach the same numbers and levels of audience figures that these people can reach. You wonder sometimes, you know. But we plug away. There is nothing like this programme in the UK today, if you can support it. Only if. Do go to paypal.me. That's paypal.me/Richie Allen and make a contribution. If you're doing that already, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you can't do it, don't sweat it. Don't sweat it at all. Thanks for listening. I mentioned before the programme that there are dark and powerful forces at work to prevent the breakup of the European Union, or even the full and total exit of one of its members, be that the UK, be it anybody. Now, the Council on Foreign Relations, listen up, the Council on Foreign Relations, not to be confused with the All-Parliamentary Committee I mentioned earlier on, this is the Council on Foreign Relations, is an offshoot of the Rothschild-controlled secret society called the Round Table. Now, the Round Table came into being in the late 19th century. Very few people in the UK or anywhere have ever heard of the Round Table unless they've read some of David Icke's books or heard David talk. Now, I learned of the Round Table Secret Society through David. There's no way I'd have ever come across that information through reading newspapers, through reading books, etc. Now, out of the Round Table came several organisations that you would have heard of, or that most people would have heard of anyway. I mentioned the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the United Nations, Bilderberg, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and the Club of Rome. All offshoots of the Round Table Society. Now, these groups were set up to manipulate global public policy through controlling bankers, politicians, journalists, NGOs, etc., etc., etc. Now, David Icke said in his groundbreaking Perception Deception book, which I keep with me all the time, I have it as a reference guide, it's an incredible book. David said that the offshoots of the Round Table Society are not the engineers of the conspiracy, but they are the oil rags of the conspiracy. They manipulate public perception. In fact, that's pretty much key to what they do, through their assimilation of the media, bankers, politicians, etc., as I just mentioned. Now, last week, Goldman Sachs played host to the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's a guy called Dr. Richard Haass. He is a monumental Rothschild Zionist. The president of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass. Monumental Rothschild Zionist. Before becoming president of the Council on Foreign Relations, Haass was Director of Policy Planning for the State Department, and he advised and was a senior advisor to Colin Powell. He wrote a book, did Haass, and the book was called The Reluctant Sheriff back in 1997. And in the book he argued that the United States should play the role of international sheriff. His family is Jewish. He worked for Rothschild Zionist George H.W. Bush, and over the last 25 years, Dr. Richard Haass has held various positions in the defence and at the State Department. Very few people would know anything about him. So he was at Goldman Sachs last week, and while there, he addressed an audience of wankers, or bankers, on the state of the world right now, and he talked about the reasons the world is in disarray.
The conclusion I came up with is this combination of far greater numbers of players who could do real things and globalization is what explained in no small part the disarray. And the evidence of it is everywhere. The Middle East looks like nothing so much as 17th century Europe. The Middle East is in significant disarray, or actually worse. I actually think it's in a high degree of disorder or chaos. You've got at least 4 states in significant failure. You've got all sorts of regional wars, proxy wars, civil wars, non-state actors, you name it. Syria alone, more than half the population's been rendered homeless. You've got Europe, which 5 years ago looked to me the most staid, boring, predictable part of the world. Suddenly, rather than the end of history, we're seeing the return of history. We're seeing populism, we're seeing nationalism. Election outcomes are now far more uncertain, and the range of potential winners is far broader. Brexit is a phenomenon. I think actually the entire European project, which is one of the 2 great feats of post-World War II engineering, is suddenly uncertain. in part because of internal mistakes or flaws within the EU, having a monetary policy but no fiscal counterpart. But also, now what's happened because of the refugees, the crisis in Germany, Brexit, crisis potentially elsewhere. Plus, you got the return of geopolitics to Europe. What Russia did in Ukraine violated the most basic norm of international relations, that force is not to be used to erase borders. Got away with it. And who knows if it stops there.
What Russia did in Ukraine. What about what Victoria Nuland did in Ukraine? Robert Kagan, neocon, his wife Nuland, and Kerry and Arseniy Yatsenyuk. What about their coup in Ukraine, throwing out Viktor Yanukovych and replacing him with a puppet regime? Poroshenko there today. Nuland, of course, oversaw billions of loan guarantees to Ukraine, massive sales of weapons to Ukraine, and the sale of Ukrainian state assets to buyers approved by the World Bank. Not to mention threatening Russia's sovereignty directly and Russia's access to vital deep water ports. Just rewrite history there, why don't you? And as for Syria, not even going to go there. Give me a break. So Haass is a pathological liar, but he's a key Rothschild lackey. It's very important you know that. So what does he recommend that we do with all of this upheaval, Brexit, people campaigning for national sovereignty to be restored to their countries, people campaigning to have the power returned rightfully to them in their countries? What do we do about this? His answer probably won't surprise you at all.
That if you live in a world of globalization, to make a long story short, nothing stays local for long. If you have computer hackers on your territory, they can cause mischief or worse all over the world. If you have a poultry farm that has unsanitary conditions, certain types of diseases can break out, human transmission, it can cause a global pandemic. If you're India and you decide that your economy forces you to generate a lot more electricity, and the easiest way to do it is through coal, this will have climate change consequences for everyone else in the world, in addition to whatever environmental consequences it may have for you. As we learned on 9/11, a few blocks from here, if a government allows, or one way or another, through choice or weakness, terrorists operate out of its territory, those terrorists can cause havoc halfway around the world. As we saw in Syria, if you have massive flows of refugees, it can destabilize other parts of the world, as we're now seeing in Europe. So my argument is simply, while we need to respect sovereignty and not, again, bring about a world where invasion is commonplace, we also now need to build on it. And my idea is that sovereign entities need to have the obligation to make sure that nothing is allowed to go on within their territorial limits that has adverse consequences for anybody else.
Imagine that nothing can be allowed to go on within their territorial borders if it has consequences for anybody else. If they are mining coal and using coal to drive their economy and their factories, they are adversely affecting the climate, therefore they must be dealt with because it has consequences for everybody else. Sovereign entities cannot do what they like inside their borders. If you're doing something in self-interest and in the interest of your people, but if it adversely affects us geopolitically, economically, or environmentally, we're going to come after you. So how would it work then? What would this guy, Richard Haass, who spoke at Goldman Sachs last week, what would he suggest then as a solution if countries were to act in their own self-interest? How would you deal with them?
What we want to do is set up these rules through consultations and negotiations. Here's what every sovereign entity, including the United States, is obligated to do. And we'd agree to the set of behaviors and rules or norms. And then we'd also agree, how do we incentivize countries to live up to it? How do we give them capacity, if they lack it, to live up to it? How do we penalize or deal with those who violate it? And I call this World Order 2.0, but I think this is an operating system for a world in which globalization, not just great power conflict, is the principal dynamic. It's not wrong, it's just no longer adequate.
No longer adequate. This is World Order 2.0. You can pretend to be a sovereign entity so long as you agree to our rules. You will be penalised if you violate those rules. And what is World Order 2.0? Well, it's the same as World Order 1.0 and 1.5. It is a one world government. Because signing up every country to a set of rules on, let's say, trade, the environment, migration, food safety, law and order, terrorism prevention, signing up countries to that is by nature a one world government. And these guys like the psychotic Rothschild whore Dr. Richard Haass, whom you just heard there, are going to use the media to spin Brexit, for example Brexit, as massive disorder and chaos. They'll do whatever they can to paint it negatively, portray it as racist, to portray it as hateful, as divisive, as economically flawed. That's what they will do through the media and through false flag terrorism. And one of the things they must do is stop genuine alternative media, of which there isn't very much left anyway. So to another big story in the newspapers today. Tim Berners-Lee is the man credited with inventing the internet, the inventor of the World Wide Web. Now, he's unveiled a plan to tackle data abuse, and fake news. He's written an open letter to mark the 28th anniversary of the internet. He set out a 5-year strategy because he has concerns about how the internet is being used. So Tim Berners-Lee said he wants to start to combat the misuse of personal data because, he said, this creates a chilling effect on free speech. He called for tighter regulation of unethical political adverts. And he said he wants people who helped develop the web, he wants them to come up with practical solutions to make a web that gives equal power and opportunity to everybody. Here's Enda Brady from Sky News talking about this.
It's quite obvious from his open letter in all of the Sunday newspapers that he's not very happy with the way it is going, and he feels it's up to all of us as internet users to kind of step up and take responsibility and make it better. So we can take a look at one excerpt from the letter. This is where he's talking about fake news, and he says, today, most people find news and information on the web through just a handful of social media sites and search engines. These sites show us content they think we'll click on, meaning that misinformation or fake news, which is surprising, shocking, or designed to appeal to our biases, can spread like wildfire. And he continues, and through the use of data science and armies of bots, those with bad intentions can game the system to spread misinformation for financial or political gain. And he adds at the end of the letter, it has taken all of us to build the web we have. He said, let's all build the web we want.
Create the web we want, where the web becomes an extension of the corporate media. We can expose you to what we want to expose you to. And Damien Collins is the MP charged with heading up the UK parliamentary inquiry into fake news. Now, he's ignored several emails from me asking him to interview David Icke, to swear David Icke in. And when they are holding these open interviews with people before the public, that David should be involved. But Collins has ignored me repeatedly. So who's going to decide what is fake news and what isn't fake news? Governments? Presidents? Prime ministers? I've spent so much time on this, I'm not going to dwell on it today. You know, why Trump is attacking the media, why that isn't good. Sounds good, but it isn't really. The state of the independent media in the United States. Spent a lot of time on that on Thursday. Because it's the genuine independent media they want. Not the mainstream light media, like the broadcasters I laid into on Thursday. The real independent media. Talking about people like Richard Haass and the Council on Foreign Relations and the Round Table Group and the Rothschilds. Which independent media that you know of is credibly talking about these issues professionally, on a daily basis. There's not very many. It's that independent media they want to go after. Because by doing that, they'll prevent the open and frank discussion about the elites, their plans for humanity, and ultimately even their plans for civilization. This is the Richie Allen Show, Sunday View, brought to you in association with DavidIcke.com on Fab Radio 2, alternate current radio, but not today, but during the week, and TuneIn Radio as well. Very, very quick break, back in a minute with a couple more stories, and time is flying. It's exactly 15 minutes to the top of the hour.
Looking to arrange a mortgage? Confused by all the deals available? Let Manchester Mortgages do the work for you. Take advantage of our free mortgage review offer throughout February and March and see if we can save you money. We are whole of market brokers with access to hundreds of mortgage schemes across the UK. Call us on 0161 706 0242 or go to manchestermortgages.co.uk. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage. Manchester Mortgages are a trading style of Mortgages for You North West Limited, who are authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Virtually every transaction that involves a child is valuable to somebody.
We intend to show everyone the real reason children are being removed at an alarming rate.
No, this is awful.
The baby's not been seen by the doctor or nothing.
They are psychopathic. They have got the legal right to kill children now, because that's what they're doing.
Traffic 2, available now at premiumpictures.co.uk.
Jim Rickards here, best-selling author of Currency Wars and The Road to Ruin. But today I'm issuing a critical new warning to all British listeners. Britain is under attack and your personal and financial security is in grave danger. To find out why, visit britainunderattack.co.uk now. The threat of this devastating attack increases every day, and it's crucial you act before it's too late. To see what you can do about it, visit britainunderattack.co.uk right away. It's not too late to prepare. See my full warning at britainunderattack.co.uk today.
Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is the Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIcke.com.
Now, good morning to Sonny Clarabelle, to Faisal, to Dean Smith. Let me scroll up to Gail, to Liz Jones, to Fluffles as well. Loads of comments on so many different issues. Good morning, Shona. Shona Dryden. Kate Coley as well in Manchester. Good morning, Kate. £85,000 for the McCanns, tweets Kate. How many other missing kids get that sort of money for their case? Something very wrong here, says Kate. Talk about that in a minute. I did grab that story today. Hi to Paul Nuns as well. Morning, Paul. To Spirit Samba. To Trey, to Colette. To Stevie G. Good morning, Stevie. To Stephen Brown as well. Great to hear from you. Stephen says in response to Kate about the McCanns, how many people get the help from the government they got? It stinks, all that money used. And then I'm not going to repeat what Stephen says there because it's something that might get me into trouble. Base Ninja, good morning. Jay Ferguson, good morning as well. I mentioned Dean, did I? Dean Smith, good morning. Good morning, Tiger. Karen Kelly in Glasgow as well. Load of tweets coming in there. Thank you for your tweets and for your interest in today's Sunday View. It is 11 minutes to the top of the hour. Check out the worldwidewakeup.com. David is on tour. He's in Slovenia today. This from last Friday seems like a local story. Seems like it isn't that serious. Raised a few laughs A lot of people talked about this on social media over the weekend, but there isn't anything funny about it when you boil it all down. Listen to this from RT.
Welcome back. The people of Rochdale will have to watch their language as its local council prepares to introduce a ban on swearing. It's part of a crackdown on antisocial behaviour, which also tackles skateboarding, begging, playing loud music and loitering. Authorities will be allowed to fine anyone who breaks the rules in the Greater Manchester town, and individuals could even find themselves placed under a curfew. Free speech advocates say the move is a staggering misuse of power, but Rochdale's council leader sees no wrong.
I make no apologies for trying to make Rochdale a more welcoming place for people to enjoy, and this is supported by the overwhelming majority of local residents. The council is spending £250 million transforming Rochdale town centre, and we're not going to let a small number of drunken and abusive idiots spoil it for everyone else. Offensive and abusive behaviour is already an offence, but police resources are stretched in dealing with this low-level crime. We're working in partnership with them to use our powers to deal with this more effectively.
Offensive and abusive behaviour, but that's illegal anyway, isn't it? To abuse somebody, to threaten somebody, to put somebody in a position where they're vulnerable. But if somebody's out having a couple of beers and they're having a high old time, a rare old time, as you might say in my country, and they're walking home and they're talking animatedly, and they leave a few fucks out of them, and they use the words, that we sometimes use when we're excited. Can they be fined for it? This is very sinister, this. But on saying that, I don't see how you can really take a case against somebody, for swearing, because that's what they are doing. If they're having a conversation with somebody and that person is a friend of theirs or somebody connected with them and they are swearing, how could that be deemed as enforceable? You couldn't possibly enforce that. But the sentiment behind it is what's incredibly sinister. The creeping into every aspect of your private life. The encroachment into every aspect of your private life. If we deem that something you are doing, even if it's with somebody, again, in your company, somebody who's happily in your company, if we deem that might cause offence to somebody else, we think we have the right to legislate for that and to hand out fines accordingly. So you might say that the Rochdale Town Council, the City Council, you might say, or you might suggest, they didn't come up with that idea. That's been handed to them. And it's an experiment. Just to see how people react to that, just to see how people, whether people obey it or not, and of course whether we can set a precedent. Can we take somebody to court and fine them because they said fuck in an area and somebody heard it and somebody was offended by it? Nothing funny about that. We'll follow that one closely, of course, on the Richie Allen Show. That was on Friday. Now, the BBC report today, and a number of you have tweeted about this, that police investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, who went missing in May 2007, have been given, another £85,000 to extend the search for another 6 months. The Home Office funding is to extend the probe, which has always been known as Operation Grange. And it'll fund the search for Madeleine between April and September this year. So Madeleine was originally from Rothley in Leicestershire, disappeared from Praia de Luz in Portugal in May 2007. She was 3. If she was alive, God love her, she'd be 13 now. The extra funding has been earmarked for operational costs. A number of you asking a very valid question on Twitter. What other... And you have to sympathise with any parent of any child that went missing. But a very good question is, why this particular case? And wouldn't you be a bit aggrieved if you were the father or mother of a child who went missing and think, well, we didn't get that sort of help. What's going on there? Why the special treatment for the McCanns? Kate and Jerry McCann have vowed to never give up hope of finding their daughter. I've said time and time again on programmes where I've been asked my opinion, how the hell do I know? whether she was kidnapped, whether she, managed to wander away, whether she was... I don't know what happened to Madeleine McCann. No idea. And I wouldn't speculate, because it's wrong to speculate about it. So since 2011, the Metropolitan Police has been assisting, searching for clues, chasing leads. I think Metropolitan Police last visited Praia da Luz back in 2014. The Home Office said today, following an application from the Met Police for special grant funding, we can confirm that £85,000 in operational costs has been made available from April the 1st till September of this year. These resources are reviewed regularly and careful consideration is given before any new funding is allocated. I suppose if you were the family of a child that's gone missing, you'd like to know that there's a very good reason for allocating the extra 85,000. You'd like to think, well, something has come up. There is a lead worth following. But that's not been announced, or that hasn't been identified as of yet. Now, the McCanns, as you might know, are currently fighting a court judgment which was made by the Portuguese Supreme Court in February. And that judgment might cost them hundreds of thousands of pounds and wipe out their Find Madeleine fund, because the Portuguese Supreme Court ruled in February that a book written by the Portuguese detective who led the investigation, the Portuguese Supreme Court ruled that the book did not libel the McCanns. That book, hugely controversial. And as I've said many times on this programme, most people won't touch this issue because the McCanns are incredibly litigious. They've sued a number of people and they continue to threaten to sue others who make any allegations about them at all. Now, the detective wrote this book. His name is Gonçalo Amaral. He's always maintained that, in his belief, the McCanns knew more than they said they knew about what happened to her. I don't believe he's offered any proof of that. But that's the allegation he made. They sued him, and the Portuguese Supreme Court said, well, no, they haven't libelled you, or he hasn't libelled the McCanns, because even though the couple were ruled out as formal suspects back in 2008 in newly released court papers, judges in Portugal specified that being ruled out as formal suspects doesn't equate to a ruling of innocence. So they're not happy with that. The McCanns, understandably, they're not leaving that go, and that continues. People speculate all the time on social media as to what happened in Praia da Luz in 2007. People are welcome to do that. We don't do it here. We don't, for obvious reasons. I don't know what happened in Praia da Luz. I really don't. I do accept that the parents of other children who've gone missing have every right to be pissed off with what they might perceive as special treatment for the McCanns. But that's a different issue entirely. If I'm the McCanns, I'm like, well, all things being equal, you'll take any money, you'll take any help that might lead you eventually to finding out what happened to your daughter. Okay? Right. I'm leaving that one right alone. Right there, I'm leaving it alone. Now, I'm going to finish with this 2 minutes to the top of the hour. I'm going to finish with this. Again, this might sound funny, but I don't know. Hairdressers are being trained to spot signs that their clients might be the victims of domestic abuse. The owner of Bow Salon in Norwich came up with the idea because she became aware of a law being introduced in America which requires hairdressers to undergo similar training. This is true, I checked it out. In some states in America, it is a legal requirement that hairdressers undergo training to recognise domestic abuse. Now, Rachel Buck, who also works with Leeway, which is a charity in Norwich which helps victims of domestic abuse, Rachel Buck said hairdressers are not being asked to become therapists just to encourage their clients to get help. Now, what the BBC didn't find out is, okay, you're not being encouraged to become therapists. Are you being encouraged to contact the local authorities? But no answer to that. She went on to say, when I saw that in Illinois, there was a landmark decision to tackle even domestic abuse through the scheme of teaching hairdressers to recognise the signs, I decided it would be a good opportunity for me to bring the two areas of my life together, she said. Now, this is a difficult one. It's a difficult one because you and I, dear listener, both know that all over this country and all over every country, women are in some communities and in some houses being battered from one end of the house to another on a daily basis, are being beaten, are being forced to have sex against their will. We know this. But is this the right way to tackle that? Is this all part of the voyeuristic spying on one another thing that we're hearing about terrorism and that? Is it a good thing? Is it a good thing because women come into contact with hairdressers probably regularly, most women who can afford it? Jesus, when you talk about affording it, I often pass hairdressers with the future Mrs. Allen and I look at the prices and I think, holy Jesus. But those women who can afford it, so they visit the hairdresser once a month or once every couple of weeks, is it a good idea for hairdressers to do courses in recognising domestic abuse? I don't know. It's all very Big Brother. It's all very Orwellian to me. That was Sunday View for Sunday, March 12th, 2017. I've been Richie Allen. Thank you for listening. Join me tomorrow. Peter Tatchell and Paul Craig Roberts are my guests for the Richie Allen Show live at 7 p.m. GMT tomorrow. Thank you for tweeting the programme. Look after yourselves and one another and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.